I'll be in open motions the side of the ocean, so cheer up, my lad, and cheer up them all. I am James D. Morris, Dud Morris. Nobody knows me for anything but Dud. But in the military, I was J.D. Morris. You went by initial. I'm 94 years old now and a half, and I still live out here in the country. I've always been a country boy. I was in the Navy, and I was in the amphibious. I drove an amphibious landing boat. I was the driver of that boat. That was my job. I had 3 men under me, and I drove the boat. I got back home, and I got back home in June, first day of June, and the 5th of October, I got married. And it lasted 69 years, 4 months, and 11 days. Had a wonderful, wonderful marriage. I have a great family. We lived in the country, and at times before the war, times were real hard. People, there weren't many jobs, and people, we made all of our living off the farm. We bought very little stuff. Sugar and flour is about the only thing we bought at stores. But we didn't have any money, but we had plenty to eat. Always was that. And people were very close to each other. And when you got sick, you didn't go to the doctor unless it's just terrible. But you stayed at home, and if you had the flu or something, people would come in and sit at night with you, so you folks could get some sleep. People were very close. Something I didn't tell was about life before I was going to school and stuff. We had no electricity at that time. And everything, we had hall water. We didn't have a well, we had to wall water, we had to cut wood for wood fireplace and stoves. You had none of the conveniences you had now. We had no telephones. It was many years before we got telephones and got electricity. We bombed Pearl Harbor. I was 16 years old, just barely, I think. And I remember my dad and some men were talking that day about it, and they said, well, it's a little small country over there, and it won't last long. And they said, Dud will never have to go. And I was a little eager beaver, and I wanted to go for my country. And so it went on till I got 17. When I got 17 years old, I wanted to go in the Marines. But my daddy talked me out. They had to sign for me. So I went down to Camp Swift and went to work down there, and I saw them soldiers going out with every day of them packs on their back. And I'd always heard the Marines were tougher than the Army, and training-wise. So I said to myself, well, if Marines, any tougher than what these Army boys are doing, I'm going to go in the Navy. So me and a friend of mine went down to Corpus Christi, and went down there and saw a buddy that was in the Navy. And we started back home. We was riding bus, and you wanted, at that time, they had attacked us, so you wanted to get in. So we came back through Austin, Texas. Me and him went down on 5th and Congress to the old post office building and joined the Navy.
And what year was that?
That was in 1943. I was just before my birthday was November 21st, 1943, and it was around the 1st of November that I did that so I could get in the Navy. They waited a week and sent us down to San Antonio. We took a physical there, and they sent us back home for a week, and then we went back and they put us on train and put us on train to go to San Diego, California. I got to that was on the 18th of November, and it took us 2 days and nights to get out to California. We got to California on the night of the 20th of November, and the next morning I woke up. I was 18 years old, 21st. We went to San Diego, and we went to boot camp. Boot camp lasted 5 to 6 weeks. It was usually longer, but they would rush us through. When you got in boot camp, you stayed there for 6 weeks. You didn't get out, no leaves or nothing. Everything was there, and they was training you. And after 6 weeks, they called us in the afternoon and called out about a third of the platoon was in. We got to go home. The rest of them didn't. I came home, had a 10-day leave. It took me 5 days to get here and back. And then it snowed, and I didn't get to get out till the last day. Went back, and I went to Balboa Park. There was a big airplane hangar there, had about 1,000 men in it, and you stayed there till they assigned you somewhere. Then they assigned us over to Oceanside, Coronado Island, California, there at San Diego, and we went there, and we drove boats, just rode around in them, and we didn't learn anything. And then they made us a company and sent us to Oceanside, California. And we done all of our training in Oceanside, California. Drove boats every day, and that's all we done is haul. Run in and out and learn to drive. And I got plenty of good training. So we stayed that was from about April till October sometime of 1944, and we shipped out from Oceanside, California. We went to San Francisco. We stayed in San Francisco for about a week, two, and then they put us on a ship on Thanksgiving Day, 1944. Put us on a ship, APA 119, USS Highlands. We went from there to Hawaii. It was about 6 or 7 days getting to Hawaii. We got to Hawaii, they put us out, and we stayed there till January, I believe about January 24th of 45. We did not go to, after we got out of boot camp, you got to go to town all the time. Hawaii, we got liberties to go to town in Hawaii, but it was crowded with soldiers, sailors, Marines. Couldn't hardly get around. We stayed there January 24th. They put us aboard a LST and sent us, we went up through the Marshall Islands and then to Guam. In Marshall Islands, we never got off the ship, but we were there 2 or 3 days. We was about a week into the Marshall Islands. Then we went from there to Guam, and we anchored off Guam for 2 days, 3. We did get to go to land for a little party there, and then we shipped out of there. We never knew where you were going. They never told you. And when we left Guam, we got out to sea a good piece while they carried us into the chow hall. All of us that drove the boats. I was a boat driver. And they showed us a film of Iwo Jima and told us that you're going to an Iwo Jima. Said it's a little small island. Said y'all shouldn't be there over 3 to 5 days. Said said they've been bombing it for 6 weeks, been shelling it for a week, not getting much resistance. They were very much wrong. We got to Iwo Jima on the 19th of February, and they was them Japanese were dug in caves and pillboxes. They could go from one end of that island to the other and never come above ground. And it took 36 hard days for them to take that island. We went from Guam to Iwo Jima on a ship, LST 676, and when we got there, they lowered off of big transport ships. They lowered these amphibious boats that we drove, and we took a boat, and we got that boat, and then they had us go by a big ship, and Marines had come down off cargo nets and get in our boat. And we circled around for a little while out there, and everything was done by clockwork. Everything was timed to the minute. And I said, when they had us come out of that circle and Indian style, single file, and then we got closer to the beach while they made us line abreast with our boats, weren't going too fast, and it was all the way down that beach, boats all at one time from one end to the other. And we got, I don't know, probably a quarter of a mile maybe from the island. They give us a signal to go ahead, full speed ahead, and that was the secret of running the boat. You drove it as far up on that beach as it would go, flat bottom boat. That way, if a breaker come along, it didn't pick it up and flip it around sideways. But we had some new guys that they were scared to put it up there, afraid they couldn't get off. And they get up there sideways, and then they couldn't get off. So
you couldn't be scared. You just had to go.
You couldn't be scared. You knew it was dangerous. You knew that you could get a boat up any time. But you had a job to do, and you had to do it, your job, because if you didn't, it messed up the whole thing. So we went in, dropped the ramp in front, it went down. Those Marines went off there in a hurry, and we backed off that beach as quick as we could. And you had to back through the surf because you couldn't go into it front. You had to back through the surf, the water had come over you. And we got through the surf out, breakers. We turned it around and away we went as quick as we could get back.
To go get more Marines, right?
And we didn't till the next day. It got so bad the first day they had to clear up the beach some to get in. They had so much stuff. And we went back, and we stayed on the boats about 10 to 12 days, day and night, never got off. had no place to sleep. You just hunkered down in the corner of the boat, and if you find some kind of a foul weather gear, you pulled it over you and tried to nap. Okay, Iwo Jima was a small island, 8 square miles, and it was the reason we had to have Iwo Jima. Our B-29s with Guam and Saipan to Japan to bomb, but they had no escorts with them. They needed Iwo Jima for 2-3 reasons. One reason, that would stop when our planes would go over Iwo Jima going to Japan, they would notify Japan that they were coming. The second reason, our B-29s, they came back, didn't have enough fuel shot out or something, didn't have places. They had to try to land there. And the next thing, when the B-29s went over in the morning, they'd come from Saipan and Guam, going to Iwo Jima. The fighter planes from Iwo Jima, after they got it taken, they would go up, they could go to Japan and back with those the fighter planes couldn't carry enough fuel to go that far back. It was 600 and something miles from Iwo Jima to Japan. So it was an unsinkable aircraft carrier. And many planes were saved there. A job I had to do there was after, when the planes come back and they couldn't land, and they landed in they're shot up too bad to land. Well, they'd come over the island, the crew would bail out, but they let the plane go on and they'd shoot it down. And they would land in the water because the current, crosswind was so bad, the island was so small that they'd land in the water. Well, one of my jobs was go out, pick those guys up out of the water. On the night of the 21st of February, the second night, we had a big air raid, the biggest air raid I was ever in. That was a big deal. The fifth day, they landed the 4th and 5th Marine Divisions on the first day. They lost so many men. The 3rd Marine Division was on a ship going to Okinawa, so they needed them at Iwo Jima. So the 3rd day, the 21st, we landed the 3rd Marine Division. And then on the 5th day, that was the flag raising day, the famous flag raising day. And I was in a boat and going about half a mile or so offshore. We could see the Marines going up to Mount Suribachi, the volcano, and they were going up that, and we could see them getting shot, bringing them wounded down, and the others still going. And finally, we were watching that, and somebody said, the flag's up, and we looked, and the flag was up, and foghorns blowed like everything off them ships and stuff. And another thing I did there was they brought in a hospital ship, and was to haul wounded from the shore to the hospital ships.
So after they raised the flag, it wasn't over at Iwo Jima?
No, they had 31 more days. It was worlds guys lost after that.
Mm-hmm. And you told me before that some of the men that helped raise the flag didn't survive.
No, I think only 3 survived it. It was, yeah. think 3 men got off there maybe.
And who were the men that raised the flag?
They were all Marines except one. One was a Navy corpsman, Bradley. You could never tell anybody where you were at. And it was top secret. And so one of my stories, I got a letter from we didn't get mail. I went 5 months one time without ever getting the mail. And, but we got mail, and my mother, I was an only child, and very close with my parents. And so I got a letter from my mother, and my mother said, "We think you're at one of 3 places. We think you're either to Philippines, Iwo Jima, or Okinawa." Well, this is after the Battle of Iwo Jima you still couldn't tell even then. But it was done over there, but Okinawa, they were losing lots of people there, real bad. So I knew my mother was worried, and I thought, how can I tell her? There was it was impossible. When we got to Hawaii, people was writing their folks telling them how's cousin Pearl, Aunt Pearl, and Sister Pearl, and everything. And they told us there that we know better than that, so they had cut all that out. So anyway, I was laying in bed and I was thinking about it. I thought, I got a little idea, it might work. So I wrote my mother a letter. My daddy his name was Jim Morris. His real name was James Thomas Morris. James T. Morris. So I thought about this. I said, I'm going to try something. So every letter that I ever wrote my mother and daddy, I sent it to Mr. and Mrs. Jim Morris. So I wrote my mother a letter, and I mailed it to Mr. and Mrs. James I. Morris. I thought they'll get that. Maybe they'll figure that out. No, they was worried. When you worry, you don't think it's good. So they got that letter, and my mother, they had never had a letter like that before. And she said, "My God, something's happened to him. He don't know what his daddy's name is anymore." The next day, a few days later, you couldn't do it just one day at a time, so 2 or 3 days later, I wrote them another. I wrote it, Mr. and Mrs. James W. Morris. I thought, they'll get it now. I was wrong again. They got that letter, and they said something's happened to him. Said he's been shell-shocked or something. He don't even remember his daddy's name. And so I waited 2 or 3 days, and I wrote him another one, and I mailed it, Mr. and Mrs. James O. Morris. And they always answered that letter. When they got to the mailbox, they'd read it before they get back to the house. And I put in there that time, I said, "Check your mail." I said, "I'm sure you're getting my mail, but I said, since y'all moved, I'm not sure if I've got the correct address. I may not have the correct address." And they read that, and my mama told my daddy, said, "My God, Jim," said, "he's trying to tell us something." They broke to the house, and she always kept all them letters. And she backed them up there. It was James I. Morris, James W. Morris, James O. Morris. They said, he's at Iwo Jima. Yeah, that's the way it was. We left after the war, we stayed at Iwo Jima for a long time, and they just got out, some of us different times. And so I left Iwo Jima around the 1st of April, and you went the way they sent you. You didn't know how to go. So I was sent home, got into, I made several stops on the way, went back by Guam and by Hawaii and all, and it just took a lot of time. And when I got home, got back to San Francisco, why, then they put us on a train. After 3 days, we stayed there 3 days, and then they sent me to Camp Wallace in Galveston, Texas. And we got discharged there on May the 31st, 1946. And the war was over in September of 45. It took me that long to get back home. I never let my folks know when I was coming home. So I got back to Elgin, Texas. Well, I had sent some letters home, and that I'd made up like I was still there, and they mailed them, some of them without stamps on them, and they come back. They got them without it. I'll give them to a boy to mail for me, and he threw them all in the mailbox and mailed them at the same time. And those letters began coming in with postage due, and some of them with it. And where I put the date I wanted them mailed, I'd put a stamp, give them a stamp to put over that. And he didn't do that. So they knew I was coming home, but they didn't know when. And my mother, she told my daddy, said, when he gets to San Francisco, he'll call us, send us a telegram. Wasn't no phones, so he'll send a telegram. And my daddy said, no. Said, we will never know he's here till he walks up right out here. And that was right. I got into Elgin on Saturday morning, and this same guy, Johnny Turner, he saw me, and he said, I'm taking you home. And I told him, I said, no, Daddy always come to town on Saturday evening. Every Saturday they came to town. And he said, no, you ain't waiting, you going home, I'm taking you home. So he brought me home, and we raised little turkeys to make a living. And my mother was walking from the house to the barn with an apron and had little turkeys that she had just took off the nest. And we got about 100 yards from the house, and it was country then, and we didn't many cars pass. One passed, you looked, and I stuck my little white hat out the window and waved it. My mother dropped all of her turkeys. So excited. Back home, things had changed some. People had found a few more jobs, and I think they were living a little better. Something I hadn't said, people were so patriotic at that time. If you could hitchhike wherever you wanted to. If you had a uniform on, people would cut in front of one another to pick you up. If they wanted to pick you up. You didn't have to be worried about nothing.
Okay, was there a lot of your friends or other people that you knew from around this area that had gone?
Oh, yes. Everybody that was in those age deals, wow, they even drafted people up 38 years old. But most of them, guys all wanted to go. They wanted to go do what they could. It was kind of, and the only way you kept out, they would take you down and give you a physical. If they found something wrong with you, they didn't take you. But that didn't mean they wouldn't call you back. I had a good friend that they like to wore him out. I don't remember what all his trouble was, but they would never take him because all of us had been in service. None of us talked about it when we come back. We kind of wanted to get it cleared out. And everybody had went different places. Everybody had done something. There were some people that didn't ever get. I had 2 friends that went to Corpus Christi, stayed there the whole war, never left. You went where you didn't blame them because you went where they sent you. And people were so nice. You walk into a place here in Texas with a uniform on, and they still, somebody buy you breakfast or something. You know. And still today, I wear a cap. It says World War II, U.S. Naval Amphibious Force, World War II or something. And I have been in several places and get up to leave, and they say, yours is done paid for. Still today. Means so much to me. Not that I feel like I'm any better than anybody else, because all the others went too. I'm proud of where I went, proud of what I did. Some things I saw, I still in my mind. And I'm proud to say that I served my country. If I had it to do over again, I would do the same thing. I was just a young boy, and I was 18, and people were nice, and they respected us so much. Ours was a little different than some of them, and than what I've heard about Korea and Vietnam and some of that. We went, they sent us to win. And I've heard this about it. I wasn't at Vietnam, but I heard, that they could only shoot at certain times, things. Where I was at, if the enemy was out there, you thought they were out there, you could shoot. You didn't have to wait. But and that's hard. That I appreciate all veterans, wherever they went, whatever they done. And a soldier, a Marine, or Navy, whatever, serviceman, if he put on a uniform, whether he ever left the States or did whatever he done, he's a hero in my books. He was there. And that's what it means to me. I don't go around bragging about it, but I don't mind people seeing that I am a veteran. And in the outfit I was in, it was between 200 and 225, 50 men in that outfit. And we have had reunions there for years, and started after 30 years. We've been all over the United States having them. And we've located around 185 or 190 of those guys and found them, and they'd been at one of, and as far as I know, right today, I'm the only one left of my outfit. It got down to, we were still having reunions. We had 5, then we got down to 3, and then one of them passed away, and the other one couldn't hardly go. So there was 2 of us, and the last one died last February.